So obviously, resilience is something that the three of us have had a very strong interest for quite a while, but it's a big, big idea, right, and very complex. So we're certainly not trying to boil the ocean today. Really, what we want to do is just bring some attention to the concept. And in our 30 minutes today, we're going to do the following three things.
So first, we want to show how helping your people become more resilient is critical to the future success of your business.
And we'll also explore why people leaders hold the keys to building a resilient workforce.
And then lastly, we're going to share 3 very practical tips for developing resilience in yourself and others.
And so our plan in the next 30 minutes is really to have an interactive presentation. Allison and I will be sharing some of our thinking and point of view, and then obviously Heather will be moderating the chat, so she'll be your voice in this discussion. So please do act with us. We want to make sure that we hear from you. At the end of the 30 minutes, the three of us are going to hang out for another maybe 15 minutes to do some Q&A. So if you want to stay for an extra 15 minutes at the end, if you've got questions you want us to address and answer, please feel free to do that.
Fantastic. So let's start then with definitions. And I think many of you have been chatting them in. So Heather, what have you seen in our chat function there about definitions for resilience?
We have some great answers. Kevin said adaptability. Karen said bounce back, it's how you get up. Christina says perseverance. Leslie said keep on moving. Cindy said sustainability. And a lot of these ideas of innovation, grit, you know, that being able to get up when you've been knocked down or bouncing back.
I like those a lot. And it is one of those really interesting words because there are a myriad of different meanings. And we dug up some dictionary definitions of resilience just to take a look at, and included some of the definitions that you folks have chatted with us. But we found them just a tad wanting in some regards because most of them did include words like recovery or rebound or spring back, which kind of suggests returning to a prior state after some kind of change or challenge. And we prefer this alternative definition, which points to growth and advancement. So it's not about going back or returning to a status quo, but rather adapting and growing or making progress through adversity or struggle. And as well as being about advancement, it's an adaptive response to things that we can't always control, which means it can be learned or developed. I know many of you are probably disciples of Martin Seligman, or perhaps you've read Sean Aker, so you'll know that it's well understood that resilience is not just a business concept, but it's a really important life skill that helps us all attain higher levels of well-being and happiness. And then lastly, as we put a stake in the ground to define resilience, I think it's helpful to say what it's not. And it's not about avoiding hardship and adversity. Rather, it's about overcoming or coping with it. We really need challenge to build resilience. We can't do it in a vacuum. And Luke, I think you've got a story about resilience when you moved to the US many years ago.
Yeah, so this 20 years ago, I fell in love with a girl from Chicago and left my home country of Ireland. And the first month that I lived in the U.S., I lived with my in-laws. So I felt a tremendous amount of pressure to make sure that they knew their daughter was going to marry a guy who was dependable. I had no network, so I really had to work hard to find a job. The one I found was pretty difficult, so I would say it was definitely a struggle. Obviously, it's kind of worked out. But I go back to that experience and I draw strength from it all the time because it forced me to do a lot of what you've talked about, Allison, in terms of adapting and overcoming.
Right. Well, obviously it did work out because I think that was 20 years ago, you said. So good for you for working through it all. And what's really interesting as we think about stories in general, so many of them are rooted in overcoming a challenge. So we really like this definition. In addition to that kind of overcoming a challenge, it's about forward momentum. And of course, it can be learned. So let's take a quick switch now.
We've got something in the chat. So Karen said, is it about change rather than growth? So instead of growth through struggle, is it about changing through the struggle? Because it's not always positive change afterward. So something different to consider, Karen was bringing up for us.
Absolutely. So I certainly think it's about adaptability. I think we'd like it to be positive adaptations and positive growth, but perhaps not always do you get there immediately. But a good point. And I think it just shows what a broad topic this is. So let's take a look at why it's so important in the workplace now. And Luke, are you going to lead us with this piece?
Sure. So obviously, like resilience is a skill set that's kind of gained traction for a few decades now, but it's obviously becoming much more important as our work environments become more dynamic and more complex. We've also been kind of bouncing between the third and fourth industrial revolution as well, and we're entering into a level of change that's pretty seismic. And obviously, then along comes COVID-19, right? And all of the stress, anxiety is magnified by 10,000%, right? The ecosystem of work is really under significant duress, and of course that affects all of us within it as well. And, not to kind of pile bad news on top of bad news, but I think these statistics are really important to pay attention to, given that we spend a third of our waking hours at work. When we look at the effect of COVID-19, it really is resulting in higher levels of anxiety, depression, burnout. If we look at some of the statistics on the screen now, in most cases, over half of the population are indicating that that COVID-19 has had a negative effect on their mental health for a variety of reasons, or that frankly just sheltering in place has resulted in negative effects on their mental health as well. Alison, I think you were going to say something here.
Yeah, I was thinking, we observed that most organizations and most people, in fact, did an amazing job responding to the initial crisis when it sort of hit us back in March. We had all those shelter in place orders, that sort of huge exodus to working from home and supply chain re-engineering, you name it. But clearly all of that came at some huge personal toll.
Right. It feels like we've been kind of running on this adrenaline-fueled kind of fight response, right? And that was really great in the beginning because it allowed us to tap into additional reservoirs of fortitude and resourcefulness. It allowed us to adapt and do what we needed to do at the time. But now we're in month 5 of the pandemic in North America, and it feels like we're kind of starting to run on empty a little bit. Heather, I think we're going to do another poll here.
Absolutely. So you're going to notice a poll is going to pop up on the right of your screen, and it says, where do you think your organization's people leaders are? Oh, I'm so sorry. We have the wrong poll showing currently. So let's do it in the chat. What we want to know is, where do you think your people are with their gas tank? So in your chat, go ahead and enter either full, half, or empty. So do you believe that your people in your organization are full, half, or empty with their gas tank right now? And enter that in the chat. Okay, so we have a lot of things coming in. Oh, empty, empty, half or less, dropping to empty, running close to empty. I am so sorry to hear this, but unfortunately, I'm not super surprised. Between half and empty, a quarter full, half-ish. Yep.
Oh gosh.
I'm glad we have this in the chat actually, because this is more nuanced than we would have had in the poll. And a quarter tank and half a pack of cigarettes, Elizabeth said. So yeah, we're not full. I'm not seeing anyone say they're even 3/4 or close to full. So Elizabeth also said all caps empty. And it's a Blues Brothers reference. Yes, Elizabeth, I knew you were referencing something.
It doesn't altogether surprise me, but I've heard many people talking about that they're feeling rather fatigued now, but that seems very black and white in terms of where the people on the phone certainly are at right now. So I'm sorry too that you're feeling that way.
No. And thanks for everybody for entering your answers in the chat. I would agree with the comments that Alison and Heather have made. And obviously, this kind of leads us to the next point, that as we think about looking for an alternative reserve of energy that really allows our most important asset, our people, to be well emotionally, psychologically, and physically at work, so that we can kind of get through the long haul and build a better future. So obviously, when we think about that alternative reservoir, we believe that that's resilience. And obviously, we can't really have resilient organizations if we don't have resilient people. So how do we build resilience?
Well, we've selected 3 drivers of resilience to focus on today, and they are empathy, proactive mindset, and what we're calling control the controllables. And our plan is just to spend a few minutes explaining each of them in turn and then provide some suggestions on how to get started with each. But before we kind of dive in, I think it's really important to point out that in order for us to help others become more resilient, we have to develop it in ourselves first and foremost. You know, if we're running on empty, as I think we are, if we're spent and struggling, it's really hard for us to reach out and help others.
And I think the converse is true as well, Alison, right? So if we can demonstrate resilience and be a role model, it becomes a lot easier to encourage other people to do it and to have and to expect it of others as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's the one way that all of us can lead, no matter where we sit in an organization. So we're defining empathy as the creation of human connection. Human beings are profoundly social. We all hanker to authentically belong and to feel valued and to know that we're a part of something that's much bigger than ourselves. And yet, what's really odd, it's really strange about the world of work, is that it's often the case that we wear a kind of armor that hides or shields our authentic selves. We kind of adopt this work persona, and it's all that people see. And to me, one of the big upsides of the pandemic, if there are to be any upsides, is that those shields of armor have been set aside. And we're now going into people's homes every single day via webcam, and we're seeing them, and we're seeing their partners and their children and their pets and their basements and their bedhead and their grey hair. And we're seeing them as mums and dads and sons and daughters and carers and providers, and as whole people rather than simply as work colleagues. And I think that shift is really very naturally helping us to respond more empathetically with real heart and humanity, sometimes for the very first time. So, how do we get started sort of developing empathy? And I think this is kind of just a brilliant example of where I hope we don't revert back to how it used to be, but instead let's build on what we've learned and let's take it to the next level. So, I'd say here, first of all, be curious. And be curious about the whole person so they feel valued as a human being first and foremost, and as a colleague second. And you can do that by asking just really good open-ended questions, and possibly slightly of a more personal nature than perhaps you're used to. So perhaps you start with family. Tell me how your family's doing. What's going well for you today? What's feeling difficult right now? Just open up a dialogue through the use of good open-ended questions. And then this second point, it's really important to listen, and don't think you have to have answers. You don't need answers. You just need to demonstrate that you care. That's the most important gift of listening. And then the third thing here is providing time and space. We all process change differently, and I think it's really important to acknowledge and respect that when we can. So our first driver then, the first thing we can switch on to create resilience is empathy. And that's all about human connection and creating space for people to be emotionally and intellectually authentic. Our second driver is proactive mindset. And there are lots of different names or labels we could give to this concept, which is sort of somewhat similar or closely related. So we might talk about growth mindset or optimism or mindfulness or even positive psychology. And here we're talking about something that I think all of us here know about, but can often find difficult to put into practice. And that is kind of reframing a challenge or a problem as something that we can overcome or even use as fuel to get better or stronger.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Alison, this is a place where we have to be kind of careful with this particular driver, right? Because we're not trying to tell people they should make lemonade out of lemons, right? It can feel very pithy, and we want to kind of acknowledge the fact that right now people are facing what could be really difficult situations, very stressful situations. They may be concerned about job loss, they may have financial difficulties or illness. Life is definitely more complex. So we just want to be a little bit sensitive around this, as we know that people are really dealing with some difficult situations right now. So we're not trying to suggest that this is an easy thing to do.
No, 100%. I think it's a really good call out. We're not suggesting it's easy or a silver bullet, but it is a way of thinking or a way of being that we can learn and get really good at with practice. So when bigger challenges befall us, we can see a better way through. So let's just look at some ways to get started here. And the first thing is we can anticipate and plan. It's a bit of a no-brainer in many regards because, we know that adversity is going to strike at some point in our lifetime. It's just part of the human condition. So we shouldn't wait until it does to start working on our coping skills. And then we can start small on relatively minor setbacks or challenges. So, an example there might be if a meeting didn't go well. Well, then rather than fret about it, we can just own it and then ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? And the last bullet here is about language, because I think this is a case where language really matters, especially in that internal dialogue we often have with ourselves. So we're recommending two subtle but critical shifts. Rather than being sort of defeated or negative, how can we reframe that internal dialogue as a learning journey? And then refer to yourself in the third person. So I can't becomes Alison can't yet, or how can Alison? Or Alison can if, and I know it sounds a bit odd, but remember, this is all the all important self talk, so nobody else has to hear it.
And I think the pronoun shift is really, was fascinating to me when we first started talking about it. And it comes out of some research from the University of Michigan and the Center for Creative Leadership. The people who did this research believe that this works really because it causes leaders to kind of take a step back and really see the big picture more objectively. Frankly, I thought this was a little bit of a trivial thing, but I've done this several times over the course of the last few days, and it works. It really does make a difference.
Yes. I know it's a weird one for sure, but it does make perfect sense. And having this proactive mindset is super important to resilience, because unwelcome things are going to happen. So how can we find nuggets of goodness in them to use as fuel for growth?
Yeah, and I think the more we can apply this proactive mindset, the more we can recognize that, frankly, a lot of the challenges in front of us can create a kind of a development-rich environment for us too.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, we've got acres of opportunity in front of us right now. So our last driver is what we're calling control the controllables. And this one is all about focusing your time and managing your energy in ways that can make a difference. And personally, I found this to be incredibly helpful and one of the easiest of all of the drivers to activate. So as we think about our time and energy, which is probably our most precious and finite resource, we often use it pretty indiscriminately. But with a bit of critical thinking, we can shift our focus to things that we can do something about and let go of those things over which we have no control or influence. So let's explore these buckets in a little bit more detail. So bucket number one here we've called control. It's for all of those things in life that we can mostly control. So Luke, let me put you on the spot here and say, what would be in that bucket for you?
So when I think about that control bucket, I would put things like, if I think about it from a work perspective, really zeroing in on what are the things that only I can do for the organization and my role. If I think about personal time, it might be controlling not necessarily the amount of time I get to spend with my family, but the quality of time that I spend with them. So if I'm going to be with them, I'm really going to be with them. And then I think the other thing that's really important to remember that we do have control over sometimes when it feels like we don't, is how we choose to respond to what comes at us. So I would put that there too.
Yeah, I think many people might say that's the only thing we can truly control. But yes, and the reality is that the things in that control bucket, it's not. There's not a lot of things in there. Oftentimes, when we really give it some critical thought. So the second bucket we've called collaborate, and this is for those things that we contribute to or collaborate on. We don't have total control over these things, but we can exert some kind of influence. So Luke, what would be in this bucket for you?
So when I think about collaborate, so again, and from a broad perspective, I might put my health in this bucket, right? So like, I can't control it completely. I've got influence over it. I may collaborate with my health cares about how I kind of get better at that. I would put, my children's behavior. I think I'm collaborating with my children about how to get them to behave the way I want to. I don't know that they would consider it collaboration, but I would put that in there as well. And then I think at work, the team's results, the team that I'm on, those are things that I think about I can collaborate around and influence as well.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah, that's the collaborate bucket. The third one is what we're calling concede. And it's for all of those things that are totally outside of our control, but things that we often spend a ton of time thinking about or worrying about or complaining about. And in general life, it might be things like the weather or traffic delays, the stock market, gas prices, taxes. Spending time on these things is just a complete waste. And not only that, but it drains us of time and energy. And it can also make us feel really weak and powerless too. So, Heather, let's look at a chat question here and let's ask our panel for some insight here.
Yeah, so if you would put in the chat, what is something you do to help you stay focused on what's most important? So in order to keep your awareness inside what you can control, in order to stay focused on what's most important for you, what's something that you do? And while we're waiting for your responses in the chat, I'll share some of mine. That I get outside. I go for walks, and you know, we'll sometimes just look at trees, look at the neighborhood around me, and remind myself that there's more world out there than my problems, and it helps me to refocus. Also, hugging my kids is a really big deal for focusing on what's most important. So if you wouldn't mind, enter into the chat what you believe to be the thing that you do to help you stay focused on what's most important. Oh, we've got several that came in. So we've got, oh goodness, thank you. Everyone was busy typing while I was talking, and now here it all comes. Tanya says she makes a list of everything that she's thinking of and then prioritizes to the most important. So hiking in the woods helps her feel centered. Leslie says she enjoys her garden. Christina hikes in the mountains. Karen says she reads something uplifting and turns off the news. Elizabeth says breathing and meditation, music. So we've got a lot of good stuff here. Watching her 3-year-old granddaughter dance, that's awesome. Holy time on the work calendar for moving breaks and early exit in the workday, lunch or activity with the kids. Absolutely. Daily exercise, the serenity prayer. Oh my goodness. I highly suggest everyone just like screenshot all the suggestions because this is amazing stuff. I'm getting inspiration as I read it.
No, very inspiring. So good to you for all of that stuff. No, it's really, really good to hear. And I'm a bit obsessed with these buckets here, and I just make the point that it's probably a personal point really, but I'd add the past and the future to that concede bucket, because I've often spent time wasting energy replaying past events that I can't do anything about, or worrying about future scenarios that never come to fruition. So that's just my last point on the buckets there, but love all the inspiration that we've got from the group.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Our tips here on how to control the controllables and get started is to really think about your time and energy and prioritize what you can control and collaborate on and concede on. It's actually very simple to do, but can have a profound impact and provide real clarity. And then the second piece is equally important. So you need to work on letting go or conceding those things over which you have no control. And that way you'll kind of liberate more time to spend on things where you can really make a difference for you and those around you. So now we've discussed the importance of resilience and we've shared a few ways to get started. The next obvious question is, who in your organization is best positioned to help your employees become more resilient? And Luke, I think you've got the answer to that one.
I do, and I'm sure most everybody on the call has guessed this by now, but obviously it's your people leaders. We define people leaders as anybody within the organization who's leading others. It doesn't matter whether they're a frontline manager or somebody on the executive team. When we use the word leaders, we're kind of talking about that group collectively. So why are they the linchpins? Well, a couple of reasons. One, we know from the data coming out from Gallup that there's a direct connection between resilience and engagement. This is critical when we then take into account that we know about 70% of the variance in engagement is attributable to your leader. And so obviously they're in a position to have a massive impact on the resilience that your organization can build. So, and when we say they're the linchpins, we really kind of mean that they're the only people in your organization that can really get this kind of work done for you quickly. And that's because we kind of see them really sitting at squarely in the middle of where your employees are and where the opportunities for them to build resilience intersect. So we're going to look at the same 3 drivers that Allison did, and we're going to look at them from the perspective of the manager and some tips that they can do to start supporting their team around empathy, proactive mindset, and control the controllables. So the first one, if we look at empathy, this is really straightforward. You want to check in regularly. Now, and this may be, if previously you had regular check-ins, maybe once a month, think about doing them biweekly. But the other thing that's an important component of this is we're not encouraging you to put tons and tons of hours of internal calls on your calendar, but it may be the other thing is it's about the frequency of check-in. So it could be a simple text message. It could be an email as well. It doesn't always have to be a call on your calendar, but just check in regularly and stay connected. I think the other one is you want to look at cultivating a sense of psychological safety on the team. Two simple ways to start doing this are really make sure that you bring the team together pretty regularly if you can, and do it in a meaningful way so you're helping them connect to the work that they do and connect that to the outcomes the organization is after, so they really have a sense of the impact that they can have and build a sense of belonging or a feeling of belonging to the organization. And then I think the other is go first, right? If you're a leader and you're trying to encourage this skill in the folks you lead, go first, be empathetic, be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to stick your neck out. It's okay. You don't have to have all the answers, but go first because it's going to encourage the people around you to do the same as well. If we move on, then the next tip for managers. I think we're going to go for a poll. I think we're going to go do a poll now, Heather. Sorry, getting ahead of myself there.
Yeah, no problem. So you'll see a poll appearing on the right side of your screen. It says, where do you think your organization's people leaders are when it comes to creating psychological safety with their team? Go ahead and enter your answer, hit submit, and we're going to close the poll in about 3 seconds. We don't have much time. So do you believe that people are doing well or average or poorly in how they are allowing psychological safety with their teams? And while we're waiting for results, is there anything you'd like to share, Allison?
Well, yeah, I think this is huge. This is a biggie. We know that strong support networks are one of the most powerful predictors of resilience. And more than that, they're a really potent predictor of life expectancy. So as we think about support networks, there are really three: family, friends, and work. And given all the time that we spend at work and what a huge part of our identity it is, then there's a massive opportunity here for leaders to make their teams feel safe and supportive and make that a really strong network for their people. Have we got the results in?
That's a great point. And yes, the results came in. So we had a split in how people are seeing their organizations right now, but the majority of people said that the average is the case. So people are hesitating to speak up when they feel personal risk. So there's room for improvement there. Absolutely.
So the next leader tip is around the proactive mindset. There's a couple of easy things that we think that people can do here. One is start to develop a kind of a debrief routine. And you can do this individually, you can do it at a team level once a project is over, but really the goal here is to ensure that the folks you lead are learning from their experience and most importantly, applying those lessons as they go forward. Really simple question framework to do this is at the end of a project, what went well? So let's celebrate what we think we did really well. What did we learn? What might we do differently the next time? And I would add one more to this to say, if we know what we would do differently the next time, how are we going to make sure that we actually do that when we're in the same situation again?
I like that, driving some accountability. You know, I really like this tip, Luke, and I call this the wash-up tip after my dad. He was in the Navy. He's retired now, and wash-up is a term that he used to debrief after military operations and exercises, and he brought that to our family dinner table on a very regular basis. So as we were sitting down eating together and reviewing our day, he'd often punctuate it with, what went well for you today, and what are you proud of today? And then if we moaned about something, he'd say, well, what did you learn from that? And what would you do differently if you had the chance to do that again? So it was a kind of a bit odd at the time, I have to say. But as I think back, that was a huge gift that my dad gave us to sort of really think critically. And I think it's a really easy thing to make a habit with your teams. So that's the wash-up tip.
Thank you, Allison. And then the last one, I know we're just a little bit past the bottom of the hour. We're almost through the presentation here. The last leader tip is around, obviously, controlling the controllables. So 2 things leaders can do really quickly here to help their teams is, 1, provide perspective. So this is really to kind of help the team understand what are the high value, high impact parts of the work that they do. As a leader, you're going to have a perspective on the business that's not available to them. You can see the bigger picture. So help them connect the work they do and the impact it has on the organization's strategies and goals overall. This obviously will help them feel a lot more connected to the organization and valued. The other one is lean on your coaching skills. Most organizations have a coaching model, and leaders have probably been taught it, but lean on that coaching model, because that process will really help facilitate a discussion with those you lead through this kind of prioritization process, because sometimes it can be pretty hard. Even when people know they might not be doing the right things, it can be hard to let go of certain things. So that coaching model is going to be a really important part of that too.
For sure. Thank you, Luke. I know we're a little bit over time here, but great tips for people leaders there. And in case you weren't able to take notes, we've created a resource for you that captures all of the tips and techniques we've discussed today, as well as some that work at the org level as well to support resilience of individuals and teams. And we're going to be sending that to you in follow-up after this webinar.
Yeah. And I know we've kind of just scratched the surface today in our conversation and really kind of shared our point of view around resilience with you, but we've done a ton of this work with our clients as well. So if anybody on the call today is interested in a more granular level of conversation and wants to learn how some of our clients have addressed some of these issues, we'd be happy to have that conversation and share those insights with you. So just let us know. The other thing I was going to suggest that we can share and follow up, I'm just thinking about all of the answers we got to the gas tank half full and to empty. Heather, myself, and Allison created a resource earlier this year that's just a quick kind of self-care tip sheet, and we'll be happy to share that with you guys as well after the call today. I think it might just be really, really useful to those of you who are on the call. Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, just to say, I think we've got to question time. Sorry, we're a little bit late. We got a bit carried away there, but we're going to hang out a little bit in chat. So if you've got any questions you'd like to send our way, please do that. And we'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
While we're waiting on some questions in the chat, I thought I would go ahead and kick us off and kind of prime the pumps. So those of you that you are able to stay with us, we'd love that. And I'm going to start us off with our first question and ask Allison and Luke, what are you all doing to stay resilient yourselves? So amidst all of this, what are your go-to approaches that you're doing for yourselves to stay resilient?
Do you want me to go first, Luke, or do you want to take this one?
No, go ahead, Allison.
So I'm really trying to focus on the controllables and letting go of the things that I can't influence very much. And I've got 2 adult sons who've had to return home having completed college, and neither one of them has been able to get a job yet. So, you know, rather than worry about it and what the future has in store, I'm really focusing on being grateful that we're all well and that I can provide for them. And I'm looking upon this as a gift of time with them that I probably would never have ever had again. So I'm really trying to maximize our time together and stay very much in the moment. How about you, Luke?
Yeah, so there's kind of 3 things that come to mind. One, I'm working out more consistently than I ever have. So that's either just to start the day with some positive energy or burn off some stress later in the day. And then I'm trying to be really present with my family, right? So like, I think that, again, while I may not have control over how much time I get to spend with them, when I'm with them, I'm really with them, and I don't let anything else interfere with that. And then the one last thing, and I know that mindfulness meditation gets a ton of attention, but I do this for 10 minutes a day, and I've done it on and off through my career. And what I've found is, if you can maintain a practice, even for just a couple of weeks, you start to see, and in as little as 10 minutes a day, I will start to notice that I just naturally start to become less reactive and more thoughtful about what comes at me. And so I've just found tremendous benefit from that as well. How about you, Heather?
Good for you.
Are you still
I
with
think
us, Heather?
we might have lost Heather.
Sorry, I had
You-
myself on mute. That's the experience we have about 10 times a day now, isn't it? That one of us in a meeting
Yes.
starts talking and that all you see is a mouth moving. So I apologize for that. I am inspired by both of your suggestions or both of your experiences. And the thing I've started that I never did before the pandemic is I actually put a block on my calendar at every lunch hour that actually says lunch plus mental health break. And I just let my whole company see that that's what I'm up to right then when they're trying to schedule meetings with me. And it's been actually really important for me to step away from it all and walk outside for all of 2 minutes, hug my kids, grab some food, whatever it is that's just not at my computer. That's enabled me to just have a bit of a reset point through the day. And I'm also going on more walks, and I'm having more intentional dinners with my family, just really trying to treat the time at home as a celebration and not just a requirement. And that's made it much better for me mentally and emotionally as well. So we have some things coming through in the chat. Elizabeth said that she feels like building resilience is like having a good coping mechanism. And when things are good, there's a lot of opportunity to create and exercise that muscle. But we're in an environment where we are creating our resilience muscle in the tough times, kind of like building a plane while you're flying it. So we've got to jumpstart this process. We have to help leaders develop that muscle. And you're absolutely right, Elizabeth. Karen says it's very hard when the economy is it's not a great time to find a new spot. I'm not sure, Karen, what you're referring to, so feel free to send us another note for what you're referencing. Elizabeth says she loves the idea of appreciating the good, and she recently tried to think of good things with wearing the face masks. Yeah, like what is good about the face masks? Appreciating them in some way.
I know that one. Somebody actually said to me at work the other day on a WebEx call, "You're looking rather pretty today," because I was wearing one from the office, and clearly it was they couldn't see all my wrinkles in my face. So that's it hides a multitude of wrinkles. So there's a good point.
You're hilarious. So Karen was clarifying. So finding a job in these times and then talking about having your adult son at home.
Right.
And Tanya said, Elizabeth and Tanya said, saving on lipstick. No need for lipstick. So it doesn't look like we have any actual questions in here. If anyone has a question, please put it in. We're happy to, here's one. Anyone else smiling at strangers under your mask and then feeling dumb for doing so? Jennifer, my new tactic for that is that I actually will like squint my eyes so that they think they can tell I'm smiling, because I'm like, if I just smile, they can't tell I'm smiling. But if I smile and I squint, I'm like, maybe they can tell I'm smiling. So
yes,
it's really bad because I've become lazy and I just don't smile. I just squint.
Love it. I'm glad people have got a sense of humor about it anyway. That's good.
That's right.
Yes.
But please share your questions if you do. And while we're waiting for another question, Allison, Luke, what have you seen other organizations do to help their people with resilience?
I think, lots of different things. And I think it's something that organizations are getting really concerned about. They're past that sort of initial crisis response and now thinking, we're in it for the long term. What can we do to really support our folks? And I think the main conduit for them has been their people leaders. Which is why we focused on it today, right? We kind of all have this army of people that can really help reach our front lines and reach everybody in the organization. And they're struggling too. So it's how can we fortify those people and help adapt some really good practices with mindset and skill set. And specifically, I think some of the things that they're focused on is how do you cope with ambiguity? So, when you don't have all the answers. And how can you create that sort of empathy gene? How can you create empathetic leaders and then psychological safety for your team? So I think I'd say coping with ambiguity, psychological safety, and empathy, and really using a manager or a leader as the vector into the organization is what I've observed most organizations are doing. A few people are doing some research as well, just to kind of really take the pulse of their organization. How are their people feeling? We got a good indication just by asking that poll question today, that chat question. So I think that's always a good place to start as well, really find where your people are at now before you try and help. But Luke, anything that you're seeing that's different to that?
Yeah, I think the organizations that are good at this, right, are probably one culturally, they understand the importance of the soft skills, right? So it's not so much of a like just get over it and get on with it, but they really understand how critical the soft skills are. And then I do think, so I am a massive fan of executive coaching. I think executive coaches do phenomenal work. And so I think about the coaching model and just teaching people to ask better questions, to your point earlier, Alison, right? Just getting people to ask better questions and be a little bit less directive, I think can make huge progress again in this area.
Yeah, and I think, there's a dust down the coaching model that you have, make sure people are using it, because they're all pretty similar if they're sort of inquiry based. And I think that's what people need now to help them with that sort of empathy piece too. So yeah, I like that.
We have no other questions in the chat. No, we have no other questions, but we have a lot of great thank yous, and they're looking forward to the resources that are coming. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been here. Several people have been chatting with me privately. We've been having conversations about resilience and hiring practices. So, what are we going to be doing in the future as we're hiring to screen for empathy, because it's so important. So there's a lot to talk about with this, and we're so grateful that you all were here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Been good hanging out with you this afternoon.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate it. Yeah. Take care.